This time,
wakati huu
I want to welcome our friend.
nataka nimkaribishe rafiki wetu.
Now we are starting at 10:15 right now.
Tunaanza kipindi hiki saa 4:15.
He has an hour to take us through.
Hakuna lisali moja kuelekeza.
But it will depend with his presentation. It could be 30 minutes, it could be 40 minutes, but at least he works within a window of 1 hour.
Italingana na funzo lake na jinsi ambavyo atalifunza. Hakuna wakati wa dirisha la lisali moja.
So, we have a friend. His name is Greg.
Tuko naye rafiki na jina lake ndio hilo.
If I misspell it, he will correct you when he comes here.
Kama nimelitaja kinyume atanirekebisha atakapokuja mahali hapa.
You're welcome.
Unakaribishwa.
He will speak for himself much about his life and what he's doing.
Atajieleza mwenyewe kuhusu maisha yake na huduma.
Amen.
Amina.
Let's put our hands together to welcome him.
Good morning. I'm going to use this mic at Bill's request. So I was invited by Colin Saxton to come and share a little bit about Quaker history in the United States. Are there any of you who are still students in school? By background, I am a history teacher. But now I am a school superintendent. So I will try to watch and see that you're paying attention and you're not too bored. So what qualifies me to speak on Quaker history? I'm a lifelong Quaker. 13 generations. And have been presiding clerk of Indiana Yearly Meeting for 14 years, plus or minus. Who is here from Louisville? Okay. So Indiana Yearly Meeting friends, some of you are members of Indiana Yearly Meeting. And we have some friends from Baltimore. And where else?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire? Where else? Is that it?
We waited for those from Seattle, Washington.
Seattle?
Yes.
And I assume some of you are Kenyans. We have Kenyans? Congo? Burundi? Okay. Cameroon. Okay, great. So we will talk just a little bit about Africa near the end. Okay. All right. So I want to start by recommending the best books that you could read in Quaker history. And these are on your list for those who are interested. So in the early 20th century, Quaker history generally said that Quakerism was a mystical movement.
ulikuwa ni mvumo wa usioeleweka.
And then the next book, The Quakers in Puritan England,
kitabu kile kinachozungumzia mfumo wa kikweka kule England, Uingereza,
in the 1960s,
katika miaka za 1960,
said Quakerism was really a Puritan movement.
Ilisema kwamba mfumo wa kikweka ulikuwa mfumo wa usafi.
And so there's been a lot of writing about the Quaker movement from the beginning. Obviously, I wasn't there in 1652. And so reading what other people have said is the best way to be informed. Okay. When we think about American Quakerism, African Quakerism really was planted by American Quaker missionaries. And so we have to understand American Quakerism to understand African Quakerism. Right. So two good books debating what it was that Quakerism went through in the 19th century. And then three good modern books that you can read about the 20th century. Okay, so now to talk actually not about the books, but about the history itself. Anybody know who this is? George Fox, right? Suspect George Fox. So this is George Fox.
George Fox.
England, 1624. And he is from a Puritan family. And in 1647, while praying, he says that a voice said to him, "There is one, even Christ Jesus, that can speak to your condition." And in 1652, on a mountain called Pendle Hill, he has a vision of a great people to be gathered. And that's the origins of the Friends movement. So what makes us friends? My contention is that it is that anyone can have a relationship with Jesus Christ without any intermediary, so you don't need a priest, and without any required ritual. Ritual, baptism, communion. And that is a revolutionary idea in the 1650s. Within just a few years, there are over 50,000 Quakers in England. By 1656, Quakers are in North America. 1656. And in 1682, Pennsylvania is established.
Mwaka huo mwaka wa 82 kule sehemu ya Pennsylvania.
Anybody know who this is?
Unaweza jua huyo nani katika ile picha?
This is William Penn. So William Penn's treaty with the Indians.
Huyo ni jamaa aliyekuwa anaitwa William Penn, anazungumza na Wahindi.
And Pennsylvania is established as a Quaker colony.
Na hapo Pennsylvania ikakuwa ni koloni ya Kikweka.
1682.
Mwaka ambao usema.
So by about 1800,
katika karne ya 18,
Quakers are coming into the Ohio Valley, this area.
wanakuja katika sehemu hii ya Ohio.
And Quakers, most Quakers in this area came from North Carolina.
wengi katika sehemu hii walitoka sehemu za North Carolina
To get away from slavery.
kutoka kikimbia hali ya utumwa.
What you would see at that time, Quaker worship is based on silence.
Kila ambacho ungeona nyakati zile ni kwamba abudu yao ilikuwa ni ya kunyamaza.
And the Quaker testimonies define Quaker life.
Na shuhuda ya Kikweka iliweza kudhihirisha maisha ya Kikweka.
Peace,
Amani,
simplicity,
unyenyekevu,
equality,
usawa,
and others.
na wengine.
So the church buildings are very plain.
Majengo ya makanisa yalikuwa hivyo. Yalikuwa pepe hivyo.
And by 1806, Quakers are in Indiana.
Na katika mwaka wa 1807 Wanakweka walikuwa katika hili eneo la Indiana.
Yeah. By about 1850,
katika mwaka wa 1850
about a quarter of the world's Quakers lived in Indiana.
katika roho ya Wanakweka katika ulimwengu iliishi katika eneo hili la Indiana.
So Indiana then is like Kenya now.
Wakati huo Indiana ni kama Kenya wakati huo.
And no matter where you were, so this is Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Indiana.
Ikijalisha kwa hali ulipokuwa pale jinsi ambavyo nimesema hizo maeneo tatu.
The buildings look the same, and
Majengo yalikuwa sawa.
And the people, Quaker people, look the same.
Na Wanakweka walikuwa sawa.
This is Maine.
Huyu anaitwa Maine.
And this is Indiana.
Ile ni sehemu ya Maine na hii ni sehemu ya Indiana.
They dress the same, they talk the same, they look the same.
Walivaa sawa, walionekana sawa na walizungumza sawa.
Who's seen the Quaker Oats box?
Nani ashaiona ile mfuko wa chakula ya Kikweka?
So that's from this. What's that?
Is it an original Quaker Oats?
The Quaker Oats man is chosen to represent integrity and honesty. Yeah. Indiana Yearly Meeting, 1844.
Hiyo ni Indiana Yearly Meeting mwaka wa 1844.
Who's been to Indiana Yearly Meeting? Some of you have been. Does it look like this today? Sort of, maybe. Not really. So one of the things Colin asked me to talk about was different kinds of Quakers in North America. My grandmother's sister from Indiana lived in Philadelphia. And she was a Methodist.
na yeye alikuwa ni Methodist.
And I said, why is she not a Quaker in Philadelphia?
Yeye sio Quaker.
And my grandmother said, those are not our kind of Quakers.
Na nyanya ama bibi nyanya ama bibi akasema hivi na alisema.
So how did we get so many different kinds of Quakers in North America? In the 1820s, there was a division largely centered around this guy, Elias Hicks. He was a Quaker minister from New York State, and he basically was a Unitarian. He denied the divinity of Christ, and he denied the authority of Scripture. And so nearly half of American Quakers followed him, and the other half strengthened their Christian testimony in And so some places in the East, they've come back together. But in other places, there are still followers of Elias Hicks and followers of the other side in the same community. So not our kind of Quakers. Not our kind of Quakers. But in other places, there are still followers of Elias Hicks and followers of the other side in the same community. In Indiana, there was another split. So not our kind of Quakers. Not our kind. How strongly they were going to. But in other places. Has anybody heard of Levi Coffin? So Levi Coffin and those associated with him left Indiana yearly meeting for about 15 years. And then they came back just before the American Civil War. The second major split happens in the 1840s and 50s. This is Joseph John Gurney. And he was the leading evangelical Christian Quaker of his day. And he inspired much revival in the United States. I'll skip that. And so then, let's talk a little bit about Friends United meeting. Quaker yearly meetings are basically independent. In the 1880s, American Friends saw the need to form an umbrella organization, a united organization. And that became Friends United meeting. This was an English friend who was there at the 1887 conference. His name was Bevan Braithwaite. And he wrote most of the Richmond Declaration of Faith. The conference was held in this building in Richmond, Indiana, in 1887.
In 1887.
And from that came the
Richmond Declaration.
And they met every
5 years thereafter.
In 1902, they officially formed
the 5 years meeting of Friends.
And that was here in this church in Indianapolis, Indiana. When I think of Friends in Kenya, all of the yearly meetings are very confusing to me. And John Mahanji has helped me to try to understand who is who. The same thing was true about American Quakers. For British Friends 100 years ago. And so London Yearly Meeting authorized the creation of this map to help British Quakers understand American Quakers. Nothing changes. Most yearly meetings had their own college. And the colleges produced most of the leaders for the yearly meetings. So this is much like Friends Theological Day. In the 20th century, nobody was more important to American Quakerism than this guy, Rufus Jones encouraged Quaker unity. And so some places Quakers came back together, and other places Quakers resisted the idea because they thought that some friends were not sufficiently Christian. And so you can't understand American Quakers today without understanding the influence of Rufus. Friends United meeting in the 1940s basically gave authority back to the yearly meetings. And that's represented by the new faith and practice that was adopted in the 40s. Starting in the 19th century, Friends became interested in missionary outreach. And so the first place was India, then Madagascar, and there were missions to the American Indians, as well as recently freed slaves in the United States. And this is Southland Institute in Arkansas. which was the site of
the first black
meeting in North America. And the school functioned until 1925. It's in 1902 that three American friends go to East Africa. They actually went to the American Friends Board of Foreign Missions. They went to the 5 years meeting and asked for assistance in going to Africa. And the 5 years meeting said we're too busy working in Cuba. And so they organized the African mission on their own. And went to Kaimosi. Of course, now it's the largest group of Quakers in the world. On the left is an early map of the Friends Africa Industrial Mission. And on the right is a postcard. And the back of it is signed by Edgar Hole. He was one of the first three missionaries, men. Can you read that? He said, this is what he says in this postcard. Some of our raw material from which some very precious jewels are being procured and are in the polishing for eternal in the great heavenly treasure house. They need your prayers. 1916. I went back and looked to see when the first African diaspora Quaker congregation was established in North America. The first one I know of is Minneapolis. Maybe Baltimore was earlier. So that's a responsibility for you to get the history written down for the future. This is a verse I like. Jeremiah 6:16. And so as we look back, we hopefully gain understanding that can inform us of where we are now. Yeah. That's what I have. And I would be happy to answer any questions. As long as you interpret. Any questions
Swali lolote lile
or comments?
ama kujadilia? Niko na swali. Anauliza kwamba mwalimu amefunza akasema kwamba hana nakala nyingi za wahamiaji kutoka Afrika wakikwenda kuja hapa Marekani. Sasa anauliza ni jinsi gani tunayoweza kufanya tukapata nakala hizo.
The first rule is write it down.
Na sheria ya kwanza ni kuandika chini.
And you could send it. Friends United Meetings repository is the Friends Collection at Earlham College.
Unaweza kuituma hapo ambapo unasema.
And they would love to have it.
Na watapenda upokee.
And you may know, Carla, one of the things I did was include history of our Louisville church as well as our Spanish-speaking friends in our New Yearly Meeting history.
Yeah, that was for you. Yeah. I mean, hallelujah. Swali lingine.
You're talking about the postcard? He is making a reference to winning them for Christ as people, and that the people that he's won become Christians and are stored for eternity in heaven. That he's winning them.
Alikuwa anauliza ni madini yapi, ni uzito upi wa madini yaliyochimbwa kupelekwa kule ambako barua ile ilikuwa inasema, lakini mwalimu anajibu anasema ilikuwa ni mfano tu.
Primarily in the 20th century. And Oregon Yearly Meeting sent missionaries to Bolivia in the early 20th century. And so those are the roots of most Spanish-speaking friends.
Kongamano ama mvumo wa kikweka katika wanaole usemi wa Kihispania.
And so just like African friends,
jinsi tunavyoona pia mvumo wa kirafiki kule Afrika,
it's a product of American missionary work.
Pia ni tokeo la wamishonari wa kutoka Marekani.
They come from Africa. I know that the spread of thank you. For me coming from Africa, I know that it was not an easy ride when the missionaries came to Africa. It was not like, okay, you're welcome with open doors. There was a lot of pushbacks. And even up to now, there is still some resistance. So can you share with us how Quaker managed to get into Africa and what were some of the experiences? Secondly, I would like to know the position of Quaker vis-a-vis the division that is going on amongst Christians. So, for example, what is the stand of Quaker vis-a-vis same-sex marriage? Thank you.
Of the first three missionaries, Hotchkiss, Hull, and Chilson were their names. Hotchkiss had been in Africa for several years with a different mission. And he had a vision that he established a friends mission. Obviously, they chose Kenya because it was a British colony, and so language barriers were less. In terms of resistance, I don't know a lot of stories. Now, the work in Burundi actually was started by Arthur Chilson, who was one of the three who had started the work in Kenya. And that was in part because of theological differences among Americans, not Africans. The second question, you could find Quakers on every side of that issue. Evangelical friends tend to have a conservative view, Hicksite or General Conference friends tend to have a very liberal view, and within Friends United Meeting in North America, you could find people on both sides. That has been the central issue in several recent yearly meeting splits in North America. Indiana yearly meeting has a traditional position on that issue.
Well, thank you so much for this good learning opportunity. And this is a great lesson to get to understand Quakerism. And I only have one question. You talked about the separation of the split that happened in 18th
Alizungumzia kuhusu gawanyiko iliyokuwa pale mwaka wa karne ya 18.
And you also said that we were not a part of one of the Quakers after the split. So the other part of Quakers, they still exist up today? And if so, how are they representing themselves as today? And as we look to the future, how do you think that will confuse people during the outreach? Thank you.
In the United States, as in Africa, there are all different kinds of groups and denominations. There are probably 100 different kinds of Baptists in the United States. There are basically 3 groups of Quakers in the U.S. Evangelical Friends, Friends United Meeting, and Friends General Conference. And they all still exist. And this is my opinion. Friends General Conference is very aggressive in promoting their view of Quakerism. Which is very, they would not even be exclusively Christian. Some are, some are not. So the question, does that pose a challenge? Yes, it does. And so Christian Quakers have to be equally as bold in promoting our faith. Is that it? One more.
Pastor, my apologies, I came in late, so this might have been answered. Maybe I just missed it. So, when I came to the United States, I kind of was surprised, if I could use the word. I kind of realized that the Quakers or the Friends had different forms of worship. There was one. Yeah. One was the silent. And the other one was the evangelical, the one that I had identified growing up back in Africa. So my question is, the founder of the Quaker Church, what did he identify with?
My view is that he was a Christian, and his understanding was that every human being has the capacity to respond to Jesus Christ and become a Christian. And the early Quaker movement was very radical settled down and became more conservative within about 30 years,
Kukaa chini walikuwa na utulivu,
and then became very rigidly traditional,
na
quiet.
wakaanza kufuata mfumo wa kidini.
Modern silent meetings
Mfumo wa kunyamaza wa siku hizi
are mostly very liberal theologically.
Wana huru katika mambo yao ya theolojia. I can explain that, but liberal simply means kumwona Mungu kutoka katika sehemu ya ubinadamu. Man approaching God, and the conservative, we see the divine character.
And so back to African friends like Latino friends
Marafiki wa Kiafrika na wa Kilatino
are reflections of the American missionary movement.
Wao ni dhihirisho la mvumo wa Kiamerika, wa missionary wa Kiamerika,
and have a lot more in common with
mambo misingi mingi ya usawa
with programmed friends in the United States.
Na marafiki ambao ni wale wa kievangeli na program na ratiba wale wa kiratiba.
Is that it? Thank you.
Yeah.